If there is only one thing you need to learn and understand about Magna Carta 1215, it's this. Magna Carta 1215 is the sole peaceful means known to humankind by which the rights of the weakest, most innocent citizens can prevail over a massive, potentially corrupt and oppressive state power. This is the voice of freedom, Magna Carta 1215 Learning Centre. Welcome to your next lesson with hosts Fitzroy and Carl.
Good evening, folks. Welcome to your Monday night. Another Magna Carta 1215 lesson and all sorts of interesting things coming out in mainstream media about Magna Carta 1215. You may have seen some, you may not have seen others, you may not have seen any at all. Well, keep listening and watching. We might be able to show you a little bit of it. When I say we, of course, I mean my esteemed colleague and the teacher of us all in this regard, Magna Carta 1215 legend, Fitzroy Sterling. Hello, mate. How are you?
Good evening, Carl. Good evening, everyone.
I'm talking you up a bit there. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I was just going to say you've done an amazing feat today to make it on time. So I'm not sure if the viewers know what you've been through, but full credit to you, my friend, for making it in the nick of time. So,
yep,
that's the commitment.
I can't vouch that I will be awake for all of this, but we'll see what happens. So. For those folks who don't know what happened, we left Brisbane at 3 o'clock this morning, or actually 3:30 this morning, got out of bed at 3 o'clock and have headed south. Arrived in Canberra about 12 minutes ago. So just enough time to get the computer set up and be able to do this. And the Galactic Larrikins and I will be setting up our new gear over the next few days and figuring out which button does what. So that'll be pretty cool. And then we're hitting the road. And of course, I'll have some news at the end of that if I remember. South Australia, we're coming your way. Victoria, that means we've got to come through you to get there. And New South Wales, there might be some news about a show in Byron in the near future and one in Nimbin, I believe. And congratulations, Newcastle, getting your My Place up. Sorry, Fitz, that's about all the news I've got right now. Today is a very interesting lesson. Lesson number 27. We've been talking about it now for a couple of weeks, and we're interested in getting your questions. So if you have a question for Fitz, I'm going to ask you to type it in the chat for me. And if you're in a Nun2K or the Facebook or I think one of the other YouTube channels, your questions should pop up in our chat here, and I should be able to get them to Fitz. So he has a bit of an idea. Thankfully, some folks have sent us some questions prior to this. So, Fitz, do you want to set up tonight at all in any way, shape or form? I'm going to remove my head from this just for the time being.
Yeah, so what we've got here is some of the most common questions that we've had to answer in the past on the channel. So what I've done is I've made a collation of about 6 or so of them. Or 8, or now I can't remember. But also I've gone through some of the questions that have been in the comment section of the videos, the lesson, on YouTube. And I've picked out some of them. And so if we get time, we can go through those as well. So we'll just see how we go. And so if no one has questions in the chat here today, we might get through those. And then we've got a big surprise at the end where Magna Carta makes its debut on mainstream media. So I'm pretty excited to play that as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Siva. Thanks for joining us tonight. Paul, good to see you back in the room. Maria's joined us. Sunflower, God love you. Thank you for joining us again. Fluffy Kitten, there you go. That's a new name for the chat for me, at any rate. Lisa, hello, Lisa. I remember you, Lisa. Lisa does this great disclosure. Well, brought us this great disclosure magazine in Melbourne. It was this wonderful thing that's actually being printed in New Zealand. So, Lisa, great to see you and great to have you with us. Aussie Sue is back in the room. And hello, Barbara, Mark, John. Mate, you brought the whole crew tonight. That's exceptional. So, hello to everyone. G'day, John. Jinder Lee's in, Leo, Scott Smith, whole heap of great people. Let's all learn about Magna Carta 1215 and start off with your questions, shall we? Shall I roll into the first one? What is natural justice? Is it the same as natural consequences?
Yeah, so I love this question because I do refer to natural justice a few times through our lessons. So it's wonderful that this one came up. So natural justice is like the deterministic component. Now, if you've been paying attention to the lessons we've done to date, natural law has two components, as a deterministic component and a random component. And so the deterministic component means that it's to do with the consequences. So when someone takes an action, after that action is taken, the consequences are beyond their immediate control. And so that's the deterministic component. So, for example, if you were to shout at someone, once you've shouted at them, right, what happens afterwards, you can't stop. It's just going to happen, right? So what they do, how they feel, that's just set in motion. So that's what no one can control. We can't control how we feel when we're shouted at. That's just a simple way of looking at it. So that's the deterministic component of natural justice. And the other aspect of natural justice is the random component. And that is what actions one takes after those consequences are set in motion. So if we look at it in the context of judgment, through a jury, say, or the collective conscious, right? We don't know what a jury is going to decide because they have to take in the context of whatever behavior has been the source of someone's violation or a loss or harm. They need to take in the context. They have to understand the full context of how that occurred before they'll make a determination. So no one knows how that's going to turn out. That's why it's totally random. So natural justice combines those two aspects, and so that's why it's all about how we have control over the choices we make based on our understanding of the true nature of what's happened. And so we lead with curiosity to want to find out all the detail first before we make a ruling on what we believe would be the best course of action to restore integrity and dignity of those who are harmed. And if it means that the one who is doing the harm has not had the intent to cause harm, then we're also looking for a remedy that they too are going to experience dignity in the outcome as well. And so there's so many factors in play. And so natural justice, it's not ever always one outcome, but it is based on driven by our conscience. So I'm hoping that gives some context to what that means.
I was asked this next question actually 2 days ago by a friend of mine. Are the barons required to take any further action under Article 61? My reply at the time was it would depend on where in the process they were. So obviously under Article 61, they held John accountable, to sign the document into law. So are they required to take any further action after that? Well, okay, we've executed Article 61, or it's been executed, 23rd of March 2001. That was executed by the barons once again, but are they required to take any further action after that? My answer was absolutely not.
So constitutionally, they were actually meant to be like the ones who are leading and directing how the people are to unify. That was the actual agreement. That was what they were truly meant to be in place of, because they were really the guardians, right, of the lawful process by which law can return. However, because they all tucked tail and ran, it doesn't mean that we cannot pick up where they were supposed to. So we meant to be our own leaders. So really it's yes, technically yes, but the world we live in, everything's so distorted that to expect that they would is a big stretch. It just means that we're not bound by what they do anymore, because they've abdicated their responsibility, and now it's up to us to actually finish what we started. And what a lot of people don't know, actually, this is a really good opportunity to cover this, is that the initiators of getting Article 61 invoked in 2001 was actually, there was a society called the Magna Carta Society, and they were the ones who actually approached a QC, I think it was, Leland Price, and got him to actually get the barons to do their job. So very few people know that. This was actually a people-initiated movement. And very few people know that. So when everyone says this is just the thing for the barons and they're like this elitist and stuff, it's absolutely incorrect. And so this is all on the public record and can be found. So if anyone wants to check this out, you can look it up on the public record. It's all there.
Freely speaking. Hello, Freely. Love to have you in. Haven't seen you in a week or three, buddy. Can Fitz please explain why invoking Section 160 of the Infringement Act is a wonderful method of reducing fines in the Magistrates Court by up to 90%? I think that would depend on what state you were in. I know Freely's in Queensland. Fitz may not know much about Section 160 of Queensland law, or is it the same thing we're talking about here, Fitz?
So what you're speaking about, freely speaking, is got nothing to do with what this show's about. So you're speaking about codified law. That's not actually law. That's just someone's prejudice. So if the how am I going to put this? If the consciousness of the people was up to speed, you wouldn't even be asking me this question. So it's not something we can answer on this show because we don't do legalese here. That's not what we're here to do. So all these sections and codes and things like that, they're actually null and void. It's only that the people don't know about it. So by answering your question, all I would be doing is actually perpetuating the crime. Yeah, I'd be perpetuating the crime. And so that's not what this show's about. This show's about actually how to get people to stand under the principles of morality and action their power as a unified force. So all those things don't have any power since 2001. It's just that the majority of people don't know that. So guys, if you're going to ask me questions, keep it to the topic, not things to do with the legalese system, because that's one massive fraud and it's totally immoral. So I hope that helps.
Good evening to the Galactic Larrikins who are in the house. Very shortly I'll be in theirs. Well, tomorrow maybe. What do you say to freedom fighters who think you need to fight the war with the same tools they use, i.e. the legislation, court precedents, etc., to win freedom?
Well, that sort of follows on to the last question, actually. So that sort of worked out really well. So I don't actually try and convince anyone of anything. What I do is I start asking questions just to see where they are at. So one of the first questions, I ask is, what is the intended purpose of a constitution and the relationship with equity and natural justice? Most people will get stumped there. So if they can answer that, then, because if you've been watching this show, I'd expect you'd be able to, if you've been watching these lessons and follow them carefully, I'd expect you'd be able to answer that first question I just said, that what's the intended purpose of a constitution and the relationship with equity and natural justice. Then I follow on with asking, can equity exist in a system that grants immunity to public servants violating the principles of universal morality? So these are questions most people don't ask. In our social proof group, we had a wonderful woman I'm hoping we can bring on the show. She followed the script and called them up, and she asked the question to the I think it was the senior constable about universal morality. He was stumped. He didn't know he had to really think about it. Then she asked him about, does he know his oath? And he goes, no, not offhand. So they were totally dumbfounded. These questions, he goes, no one's ever asked me that before. So this just shows you how far from the center we've moved about what we know about a system of service. Yeah. Right. So these questions I'm asking, I'm pretty confident that these aren't questions people are ever going to come across their path. They'd be stumped. Then after that, I ask, much like using a fire to put out a fire, does using immorality to defeat immorality extinguish or escalate immorality? Because anyone who uses those systems, where they use court precedents, legislation, etc., are they using a fire to put out a fire? That's the real question. And can you extinguish immorality or escalate it by using it? And so the quality of the answer you get back will be an indicator as to how much influence you can actually have on whoever you're speaking with that uses this method to take in new information that doesn't conform to their self-concept or view or worldview. So what you're really doing is you're going, is it worth me putting my effort into somebody who's just not going to get it? So really, is it worth your effort doing that? That's what it really comes down to. Is your energy better spent, in another pursuit? Because it's the same as trying to convince the normies about the jabs. That's pretty much what you're doing. It's no different. That limited mentality exists just in a different way. So that's what I'd be suggesting. I wouldn't be trying to convince them. I'd be just seeing where they are, where their consciousness is, and then just seeing, well, is it worth my time and energy to spend it on this? I usually don't try, because once I get one or two answers, I know where I'm going, what's coming next.
Yeah.
And I've witnessed it many times, and every time it's always the same outcome. And when people have put their time, energy, and labor into pursuing something, they don't let go, just like a dog to a bone. They cannot. It's impossible. You can explain it to them all you like, but they're still emotionally so deeply attached to it that they just don't let go. And that's what I found time and time again.
What is a free man on the land?
Well, that's pretty much what we spoke about just a moment ago. It sort of ties in together really wonderfully. That's the term given to the practice of using the treasonous system to beat the system. So we've gone over this when we talked about the difference between these groups that call themselves common law groups that are using codified law. And so the overwhelming majority who claim to be using common law, right, they're actually practicing this free man of the land technique to claim freedom. And so that uses different versions of codified law, which is, combinations of UCC, that's Universal Commercial Code, Admiralty, Maritime Law, Contract Law, Equity Law, legislation, statute. All these things are the antithesis of authentic common law. And so the people who are using someone's, preordained biases and prejudices to try and get past their biases and prejudice. It's kind of, it's like a oxymoron. So where authentic common law is based on the principles of universal morality. So that can't be written down. It's the same as if you go into when you walk to the shops, for example, or drive to the shops, or, like, you don't have this like notebook of all the things you can and cannot do. No one carries that around that I'm aware of. So no one premeditates, or most people, my guess is, don't sit there premeditating how they're going to interact with every individual they come across, and they've got to pull out a notebook that says what's okay and what's not okay. We just intuitively know. Well, that's us standing on principle when we go into a relationship, and that's all life is like that. Regardless if it's with a governmental structure or not, it's still a relationship.
Sure.
That never changes. And so when people start getting confused, where they think, well, if it's something the government does, we've got to deal with it in a different way. No, it's all the same. They're men and women just like you and I. They're bound to the same outcomes that you and I are. So just because they've got a title doesn't change that. And so we need to really start understanding this, right? There's only one way to interact, and that's on principle. If you're doing it in a premeditated fashion, well, that means that you've got a particular outcome that you are making sure happens. And that's what codified law is, and it's going to be in the service of just what you want. And so using those techniques, those free man and land techniques, you're actually using something that's premeditated to actually exploit and control people. And how do you get freedom out of that? That's not possible. It's an oxymoron. So, we live day to day, attempting to be our best selves, right? And how do we know how to do that, right? And most of us are successful enough times that we keep going back and doing it. Obviously, we have times when we're not, and that's when we get violence. And we start cussing and doing all kinds of things to each other. However, that's not the overwhelming experience, because if it was, like, people would be getting arrested left, right, and center.
Sure.
So we do have, a pretty good understanding of how to get through our day without causing harm or loss to anyone. And so, yeah, that's kind of a brief way, because anyone who seeks to codify a law, that's moral relativism. And if you've been watching the lessons, you probably have a pretty good idea of what moral relativism is right now. It's when you get to make up what is moral and everyone else has to conform to it. And you're not bound in anything based in reality.
I hear this one a lot. King John signed under duress, therefore invalidating Magna Carta 1215. It's never been valid. What are you thinking?
Yeah, so this is that one where a lot of people go, well, if you're doing anything under duress, that vitiates everything, except the context of the fact that if you've committed a crime, are you no longer, liable for that crime just because you did it under duress? And then you think about actually what these corporate policy enforcement agents that work for foreign corporations that we call police, right? Did they ever care whether you're under a duress or not when they're doing what they're doing. I mean, they're actively going out of their way to initiate trauma so you comply.
Yeah.
So, like we've got to really start thinking about this. So it's a misconception because what people don't understand is that King John was a feudal monarch, right? And there's no such thing as his reign was absolute. The whole feudalism system meant that he was bound to the laws of the land. So this was like a deranged idea of this dogma that came out much later, which came from that idea of the divine right of kings. But according to feudal protocols, the king was at all times subject and bound under the common law terms of his coronation oath to uphold the law of the land. That's what he was bound to, right? And that's why he had peers to make sure that he did. And obviously he shirked his responsibility long enough, and it got so bad that they took matters into their own hands and they held court. So they actually acted in accordance with the laws of the land. And only then was he made to heel if he wanted to keep his job. He didn't have to keep his job. He could have just said, no, I don't want this job. I'm out of here. But he did. So they needed to create some kind of agreement by which he could never pretend he didn't know. You know what I mean? And that every single, someone who's going to be the highest public servant, which they called a monarch, was going to be bound by that same agreement. They couldn't just come in there and go, no, I don't know anything about that. So that was their first contract that actually gave legitimacy to anyone who believed they had the authority of the people to make decisions on their behalf. That's all government is. It's just a decision-making body that it's like a small number of people that make decisions about the quality of life of those people they are supposed to be acting in service of. It's really that simple. And so there has to be some kind of agreement by which they're allowed to do that. So that's why when people say that, it's outrageous, because he committed like numerous atrocities, unchivalrous, that's a hard word to say, gross offences, and so he was already subject.
He was cutting people's faces off, skinning them alive, dragging them, quartering them. Hung, drawn, and quartered. We've all heard the saying, but do people really know what being hung, drawn, and quartered means?
Yeah, well, that's what you've just said, right? If you actually really put yourself in that space of actually being separated, right, by 4 different horses, different limbs being ripped apart, like, could you imagine what that would feel like? Then it's no longer an intellectual exercise. So, who would grant that person who does that like a free pass? Going, well, you were sort of under a bit of pressure, so you're not really accountable for that, and we don't have to hold you to this agreement. I mean, who would really do that in their right mind? How is that an act of morality to do that? So
the U.S. Congress at the moment, it's pretty similar.
Well, it's still up to the people to work that out in the end.
Absolutely.
In that feudal protocol structure, the people were ignorant of it, but his peers weren't, and so they actually took action. So that's the difference. We don't have that structure where there's someone, like a small number of peers who are like the overseers of the people. We don't, so it is up to each and every one of us to actually catch up and see what's really before us. And if we don't understand morality, right, we'd never understand how to answer these questions. So I'm hoping that gives it some more depth that you guys can sort of see that that's just one of the most favorite ones that people use when they want to discredit something that they don't either understand or they deliberately intend to discredit, one or the other.
Here's a question from the chat rooms. Honey Bunny's intrigued why Fitz keeps his identity concealed.
Oh yeah, this is one I'm surprised hasn't come up sooner, actually. Yeah,
so
yeah, rightio. Well, it's a good opportunity to ask that. So what I've come to understand is that if we want to change the world and move into a new way of being, like what most people claim, they want to live a different way, we can't use the same methods that created it, right? So what's the most common thing people do? They come in, they put their face on, they become a personality. It always
sorry.
So yeah, I know it's a bit of a conflict right now. I'm talking about people who are like
that's all good.
Claiming to be like a leader in the freedom movement, for example. And so then they become like an authority, and the knowledge takes a backseat. So when I understood that, I saw like what happened to Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and JFK, and it's always the same. If you have a figurehead, right, who represents the people, all you have to do is you just need to discredit them, because the Mossad worked that out. Is like, if you discredit the messenger, the message gets tainted with it, right? So if I was going to share knowledge, I couldn't actually. That was never going to work out, because it's, for me, the knowledge is neutral, right? You either take it or leave it. I've got nothing to do with that, right? But if I start putting my face to it, people are going to start making the judgments and assessments based on what they believe they see when they look at you, right? They're starting to read in. So we take out the visual aspect and we just leave the knowledge front and center, because I'm irrelevant, right? All I am at best is like some kind of vehicle or conduit to share that which people already know inside them. All I'm doing is giving it literacy, right? And so that doesn't need a face. So that's the way I've come to understand it, because it's not about me being known. It's about the knowledge getting into people so they can stand in their power, right, and act on it. And I've seen it happen. I've seen people who have written to me and told me, how much this has changed their lives. The knowledge is really landing. And then when that knowledge lands, they cannot help but to act on it. It's just not, you can't extinguish it. And that was always my intention, is just to get the knowledge across. Once it's there, it takes care of itself. So I'm hoping that's a satisfactory answer.
Well, that and well, I can say, mate, if you did show your face, you might gain that little bit of celebrity. It might get you a bit of priority on the waves. Just saying.
Yeah. Still not a good enough reason. The people that I would surf with otherwise wouldn't even be watching this, so it would be irrelevant.
All right, there you go. Do I leave notices and mail from corporations masquerading as government unopened and mark the envelope returned to sender, no contact, no consent, no contract, no consent?
Yeah, so this one I get asked a lot as well. It comes up in the channel heaps. What we need to understand is that this system has the power to punish, and we don't. So these corporations masquerading as government, they work on this presumption system that you consent, even if you ignore the notices or send back, no contract, right? It doesn't work out very good for you. They'll always still take it as you're actually consenting, right? So that their system needs some form of rebuttal in order to have some challenge to it, because they run on those 12 presumptions of.
So this goes back to the question earlier about using UCC and other types of common law to fight them in their court. Now, somebody near and dear to us, Patriot 101, is a very fair man, a very good man, heads into court and represents people with a common law view on a regular basis. Now, he has had some wins, but then we qualify or quantify wins in a different way when we're talking about the use of this kind of system, don't we, Fitz?
Yeah, so we got to understand what they mean by win. Does it really, really go away? And do they stop being harassed the way they were, how it got them there in the first place, right? What is it? Is it just a temporary stay of execution? But where's the actual long-term outcome? What's going to be the long-term outcome of that? It's like putting out a spot fire and then it comes back again. Like, your energy is always going to be sapped into that. Is that the ideal of what you want?
It comes back in a different place. Would that be fair to say? Because I do believe that you can stymie an argument using a particular kind of mismatch of various different common law styles. I believe that you can bamboozle some judges into a point where they'll stand up and walk out of the court, but I don't know how well you're going to go if you start standing up in the court yelling, the captain's abandoned the ship or the judge has abandoned the ship, I'm taking control, I award myself damages, and walking out. I haven't actually heard of anybody doing that, but in theory, that's what could be done.
Yeah, well, I mean, right now, the structure's in massive panic. So they're not even holding to their former structures. They're chopping and changing. Like, you'll get documentation that doesn't have any court stamps on it, any registrar's names on it. Like, it's just really flimsy, and they'll still come and enforce it. So we're in that stage now that they're shifting the goalposts desperately, because they're actually getting challenged far more than they were expecting, and they can't hold to their own systems anymore because they're getting found out.
Yep.
And so now, like they're constantly changing it. So if you think what worked for you once is going to work for you again, good luck, because they're just coming to railroad you, because their whole structure is that they must make you responsible for their system. That you must be the one that they sap the energy from.
Yep.
Without that, they've got nothing. So they're going to find a way to do it because they've still got the power to punish. So, the way we say it is we're going for long term, right? We're not going for short term. We're always going for long term. So we're thinking, distance, not what we can get for today, but what we can secure for permanent, and what will prevail. And so that's why we use the lawful structure.
In our early days of discussion, I was asking a lot of questions. Obviously, what do we do? How do we take back our freedom? What do we do? Stand up, fight, pick up a gun, go and get a gun license. What do I do? And one of the discussions we had centered around taking over the public buildings, taking our public buildings back. So why don't we go and take over our public buildings?
Yeah, well, see, this is the thing. I was actually speaking to someone at the end of last week, and they were saying they came to rescue these people who tried to use the Magna Carta to take buildings. It was like 6 of them, and they all got arrested and stuff like that. And I said, look, I'd love to know what the context of what all that was, because what I've heard, people who say they've used the Magna Carta, who knows what they've done. They're probably mixing methods and all kinds of stuff. But the sheer fact that someone thinks that a small number of people, right, is going to go and take over a building and now it's going to be life-changing, like that's just delusional, because the reality is shaped by what the majority accept as a truth. Even if it's not truth, whatever they believe shapes reality. So all that's going to happen is you're going to be fodder for the media, and then you're actually going to make people who actually follow the law, the real law, not the pretend law, which is what you'll see. We've got a video that proves that actually. Is the media will just have a field day with you, and they'll discredit anything that's got to do with, like, they'll just like go, oh, this is a hand me, give me. So if you do that without the actual knowledge of the masses, it's never going to work. You're just going to set yourself back even further. And you don't want, if your intention was to make people who can see the truth look even crazier to the general public, well, then that's all you're going to succeed doing, and you've done a wonderful job. So this can only happen with a lifting of the floor of the consciousness of the majority. It can't happen any other way, because you got to think about what weapons and what resources this structure has to pound us with, right? And so you're just asking for it if you go in small numbers. This has to be like a mass movement of the people, where we're covering, the police are covered and the military are covered, so they can't use each other to back each other up. Like, we've got to have enough people to sort all that out, right? So that can't be 5 or 6 people. So if you do this right, you are just making life hell for yourself and everyone who's taught you how to get to this place. So that's why we don't do that. We need to be very patient and methodical and slowly start working away in a peaceful manner. Because if you give the system any reason to be belligerent against you, they'll jump it. And they are looking for that opportunity. Because right now, if you've seen what all the media stuff that's coming about sovereign citizens, this is how they squash it.
Yeah.
So we don't want to give them any more fodder to make sure that they can pound us even harder.
Yep. Makes fair and very good sense. So it seems Dirge Media took a dislike to lesson number 19, competitive sports. Nothing trains and exercises and builds community like macrame or birdwatching, Fitz. Seems like Fitz did have the ball kept off him successfully as a small boy. It also seems he's oversimplifying and lumping all of his points into one universal theory, just like a young person would, and does not understand nuance and the fact adults can tell the difference from sport and wanting to go out and willfully maim someone. Are you still a small boy, Fitz?
Yeah, look, when I saw this one, I was like, oh, this is so awesome. I love this. Sorry, guys, I haven't really gone through the comments after the shows, but doing this Q&A gave me an opportunity to spend some time looking at it. And when I spotted this one, it just jumped off the page for me. So I'm like, oh, wow, this is a real good opportunity to actually answer questions that I didn't even know were there.
Yeah.
So if we break down the first line, it says nothing trains and exercises and builds community like macrame or bird watching. Like, what's the actual intention behind that line? Like, what's being said here, right? As I'm understanding, and you guys might have a different interpretation, it says that anything that's peaceful, right? There's no growth in that. You can't actually develop and expand and grow if it's peaceful. Only things where there's some combative environment, that's as I'm understanding it, it builds character. That's what's being insinuated here, right? And so if you really think about that, we've got to ask ourselves, what is meant by building character? Is it about how to be more competitive and find ways to beat people? Is that what, because that's pretty much what happens when you put people in a competitive field, that they're going to actually find ways to enjoy harming each other.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of like, it seems that this individual has taken that on and it's assimilated into them as a truth. And when it's challenged, they can only see the world in polar opposites. Like there's either this kind or there's being soft, right? So that's what's being said here. And then it says, seems like Fitz did have the ball kept off him successfully as a small boy. Now, first question is, where's the evidence for this statement? That's the first one, right? But if we just say, okay, let's just say that is the case, right? What's really being promoted here? It's like, it's saying that this is sour grapes, right? Like you are no good at
sport, at a ball sport.
Yeah, and so then you resent anyone who is. Like, that's a pretty big statement to make of someone you've never met before, right? Because how do you prove that, right? And so if we think about what common law is that your peers will judge you, right? So it's not a preordained outcome that you're guilty. But right now, if you have a look at this is guilty before even getting a chance to state your case, right? Because there's all these assumptions being made as truths. Right?
Yeah.
And people do this all the time. So the very people that are fighting for common law don't understand the basic principles of it, right? As soon as you make an assumption about someone in your mind, of what you believe they are and what you believe the truth about them is, you've become judge, jury, and executioner with no evidence. Instead of leading with curiosity to find out, well, what does he mean by that? You just go and shut things down because you want the world to conform to your own way that you've come to accept it as true, right? So then we have a look at what it says later. It says, it also seems he's oversimplifying and lumping all of his points into one universal theory, just like a young person would, and does not understand nuance. So there's like another assumption and presumption, right? Like it's just one after the other. So then there's like, oh, I must be really simple, because I'm not speaking the way this individual wants to hear, right? That's what happens. If you don't say things as I like it, then there's something simple about you. So it's one attack after another. No evidence. It's just like, no, I've got to get rid of this. And so you think, what a tragic way to express yourself, right? Like there's something my guess is this individual has felt really good about themselves, about when they've been superior to somebody, and they've loved the idea that there's someone inferior to them, and that's how they've come to understand their self-worth. This is what I'm seeing is being protected here. And when that gets challenged, they've got nothing else, so all they've got left is attack, right? And then it says, and the fact adults can't tell the difference from sport and wanting to go out and willfully maim someone, right? If that was the case, right, if adults could really tell the difference between fact and fiction, why have so many people lined up and got jabbed and made their children do it? I mean, it's right there. Whether it's sport or not, people can be mind controlled. There's different ways to do it. And so that's, like the evidence is there in front of us if we want to see it. But then the last question is, are you still a small boy? Absolutely. I love the fact that I'm still a small boy, because that means that I'm in touch with my intuition. Because when you're small and little, you don't have your ego overriding your intelligence. So I take that as a compliment. Yes, I am. Absolutely. That's the reason why I can actually stay on principle. Because you know what they say about kids and animals, right? They're the ones that can sense someone's energy, whether they're of quality character or not. So
absolutely,
they don't need to have someone explain things to it. They can just sense it. Babies and animals.
Yeah.
So so I love that last comment.
That's very cool, isn't it? That's good score. All right, let's get on to our next one. Where does this fit in when the father had many warnings when he kills his two children and himself? This happened to people we know in Port Lincoln only a couple of years ago. Okay, so I gather. So she's asking, where does common law fit in when a father who obviously had been in trouble and warned by authorities in a domestic situation, by the sounds of it, kills not just himself but takes the 2 children with him? How does what we're doing here in the Family Violence Act help?
So that was the lesson we did 24, where we spoke about the real devastation of codified law and how it tears families apart, and it keeps loving parents away from their children, because that's a way to maximize how we harvest the population and how we create new broken adults. So that's what that lesson was about. So I'm trying to figure out the context of what this question's coming in. My guess is, and if Mrs. Penn is listening, please clarify it if I've misunderstood it. My guess is that she was asking that if there's no such thing as family violence acts, right, how would we prevent, these really critical incidences where, there's been men who have actually taken their children themselves out of the equation. Yeah. And so if you really think about it, right, if you're at that stage where you're going to do that, there is no bit of paper that's going to stop you. So the Family Violence Act is not going to stop that. It's because if it did, these incidents wouldn't happen. So that Family Violence Act is not for that purpose. Because if someone's at that level, they're going to, kill their children. They're going to do it because they're not afraid of a piece of paper or any consequences of it, because they've already resigned to the fact that they're going to disappear off the planet. So they're not in fear of being jailed or anything. So it's kind of irrelevant, really, to mix the two up. They've got nothing to do with each other. So someone who's going to conform to that Family Violence Act is someone who has no intention of harming their children. So that's why it doesn't actually make sense to mix the two up. They're two separate things. So we just got to understand the context of what's being explained when we do our lessons, guys, and try not to confuse ourselves with our own ways of seeing the world.
Here's a great question from Elements. Some people in the UK are referencing the Bill of Rights as constitutional. I see this as a major distraction from our true common law constitution, Magna Carta 1215. What are your thoughts?
I'm going to guess, Elements, you've been listening to the lessons quite attentively, because that's exactly what we've been explaining the whole time. It's just another way to set the trap for people to, be under the control of Parliament. So yeah, I agree entirely. It's just another trap. And if your ship's going down, you're going to throw everything you can at it to keep it afloat. So this is just another attempt. They know they're going down. It's just how fast is the difference.
Yep. Where does the path of logos leads you, Fitz? Are females going to be blamed again for the fall of free men? Introduction of one masculine god, the father, and removal of the goddess, the mother, can tell you about our current issues. How did we step on her who brought us to life? From Gordana.
So I've never heard this term path or logos. So I looked it up, and it's pathos, logos, and it means, so I've never heard that before. So I'm like, I'm going to learn something. And so I looked it up, and it means to use emotionally charged language to manipulate people into coming to your way of or your argument. So what I've been accused of is that I've used, and this is the same lesson from that Family Violence Act, I've been accused of using emotive type language to get people to believe what I want them to believe. That's what I'm being accused of here. And so then she goes on to say, are females going to be blamed again for the fall of free men? Now, if anyone wants to go back to that lesson, you will hear at the beginning, I actually state the only reason I'm taking it from the father's perspective is because I've only got data on that. And I welcome any female who wants to, message me or send me some kind of information about their experience where the system was worked, it was worked against the female. So, I have heard in some instances that if women are married to police officers and stuff, it's an entirely different situation. Everything gets flipped, right?
Yeah,
so it's all about.
I know 2 women like that completely. Absolutely flipped. One of them wound up in jail.
Yeah, so it all depends on who's in that position where there's going to be a greater advantage to whoever has more access to the power structure, right? Or who's going to work for the power structure. And that's what I did sort of claim at the beginning. I said, look, it's not to do with men and women as specific separates and that there's one above the other. It's just that's the only data I have. So I'm only working on the data I have. But at the same time, I'm saying that I'm working on what the base of it is a particular pathology. It's not exclusive to a male nor a female. So just focus on that. However, at the same time, I do want to say that if Gordana did watch the following episode, we did include information about how the whole idea of like why we're sinners and all that kind of stuff exists comes from this myth of there being a good masculine god that defeated a bad female god, and that clash, the energy that came out of that clash, was how humans were brought into existence, and that we now are going to need someone to control us who's an intercessory between this good god and us in order for us to live peacefully, right? And there was a clip of Marshall Roseberg explaining that. So really, if you waited another week, you would have seen that we even covered that answer, that this is a big setup. So this is not me favoring males over females. It's just using data to try and explain a point.
Yeah, absolutely. How much of this actually relates to Magna Carta and how much to ancient pagan religions, which is adhered to by the Catholic Church and its underlying hidden religions? What are you feeding us? What you're feeding us is basically some sort of religion. If you notice, our basic common laws are based on the Ten Commandments and cannot be improved upon. This is the covenant that I will make with them after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws in their hearts, and in their minds will I write them. Thank you, Chill Out.
So this is the one we did just 2 lessons ago, where I brought up the 10 Commandments, and I showed how it's all control, mind control structuring, the first 4 specifically. So this would have been triggering somebody's personal biases by the looks of it. And then they've come and attached all the sort of reasonings as to why their beliefs are true, as I'm reading it, right? So I'm just reading here. It says how much of this is actually relates to Magna Carta. Well, if you understand that Magna Carta is based on the principles of universal morality, everything relates to it. There's nothing that doesn't. That's why we've covered things that most people wouldn't even connect with it. And if we don't understand that all life is interconnected, that nothing happens in isolation, then this point is going to be very hard for people to understand. Nothing acts in separation. Everything is linked to everything. So, then it says that I'm feeding people some sort of religion. Well, if by religion you mean objective truth, that is my aim. So yes, I'd agree, because that is another way to understand religion. The one we get fed is the one that contracts our consciousness, where truth expands it. So that's, as I'm understanding my intention, and those who have got in touch with me, they've said that that's landed for them that way. That's how it validates it for me, because they're people I've never met before. It says, if you notice our common law are based on the 10 Commandments, that's actually not correct, because the 10 Commandments are codified law. So this is actually an incorrect statement. Most people don't know that. And when the actual the Saxon kings were actually as monarchs, they actually had a different understanding of Christianity to this structure that we know today. They had an esoteric understanding of it. And so most people don't even know that. So when they speak about laws of God, they're not speaking about this like eternal being that's a creator being. They're talking about the principles of morality. But that's just the way that the people of the time understood how to speak. So they go into that space. But they had a different understanding of the word God than what we've been presented. So that's a very little known thing that most people aren't aware of. So there's a lot of lack of knowledge in this statement. Then it says this covenant that I will make. I don't even understand what that is. I've never read that before. But I think it's something to do with, some superior being injected knowledge, into our hearts and minds, and that they are now under the control of this superior being. I think that's what he's saying, which doesn't make sense, because if you're going to create beings with free will, why would you want to control how they think and what they do? That doesn't make sense. That's a contradiction in terms. Sure
is. Absolutely. All right. Let me bring up this. I'll go on to our next question. How much of this actually relates to me? No, we've just done that one.
Yep.
Fitzroy, right from the outset, at 4 minutes 15, you qualify your audience. Is that not manipulation? Brilliant tactic. Notice that another time point you use the 10 Commandments to define your point. Interesting choice. Quick question. Does a father in resonance with moral law not set boundaries for their children out of love and greater awareness? And tell me, and if so, At what point does said child's awareness become equal to or greater than that of their father? And is that your response going to be objective or subjective? Seems a deception at play here, says Billum, who's actually in the chat tonight.
Yeah, so he's back. So we'll see how he responds to this one. So I actually did make a video. I did find the 4 minutes 15 to see what it is that he was talking about. So we can play it if you've got it geared up so everyone can see it. And then we can make your own determination of whether I did qualify the audience or not.
Let me just remove that bit and play this bit.
It is going to be longer than what we might like, yet the detail is quite important. At the same time, if any of this is too confronting for you, because I imagine it's going to be confronting for a lot of people, especially if they hold specific beliefs, it's going to trigger a lot of stuff. Just ask yourself, am I ready to absorb this information? And it's okay if you're not. Yet there might be some other people that are willing and ready to absorb this information. So, just step away. If it's too extreme, it's too much too soon, you're not ready to actually expand into that space, give yourself a breath and just step away, and just leave it for others who are willing to and have that space to go step into there and explore.
Okay.
So you guys can make a determination for yourselves. Did I qualify the audience in that moment or not? Or was I just leading with curiosity of what I imagine might be happening for some people? Right. So you can make your own determination. I know what was in my mind when I was doing it. And for me, it was just making, putting something forward that I expected there was going to be people that are going to be triggered by this. And if that's you, maybe this is not the time to get into this deeply and take a step back. And, instead of preventing others who are ready by, flooding the chat with your opinion, maybe it's just better to take a breather. So, you can see for yourself. The other question, if you want to bring it back up, Carl, that the 33:30.
Yeah, 33:30.
Yeah, I couldn't find what he was talking about there, and I found it at the 39-minute mark.
Roger, that's the bit where he says that you use the 10 commandments to define your
point. And that at that 33, I thought that's funny, like the 333s. Like I know that's a thing. I don't know if that was deliberate or not. But there was nothing in there about the 10 commandments when I looked at it. It was at the 39-minute mark. But anyway, I
can bring that up on my screen a bit better. Okay, the 10 commandments are listed there on the tablets, and subliminal programming, moral and virtuous to pledge servitude to an external authority without question, also known as obedience programming, self-indulgence and separation. The arrow is pointing to...
Yeah, that's number one. Can you read what that says? Because I can't, it's too small for me.
I am the Lord your God. You shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve.
Yeah, so basically it's saying there is some superior being that, you need to worship, right? Like, what is that? That's what cults do. They have that superior structure. Right? So they're teaching you right there the actual way to separate from your own divine capacity to know yourself. Right? Because someone knows better than you and you must submit to them. That's full tilt obedience programming. And that comes from that self-indulgent energy, right? Where it separates us from the divine aspects of ourselves. It's somebody else, some other force knows better than us. So we better submit to them if we want to be safe. That's what that's doing to you. Right? Very subliminally, very subtly, but the messaging is very clear because the majority of the population across the planet operates from that belief there is some higher authority. Otherwise, they'd never submit to government. They just wouldn't.
Right.
Yeah, so if you can bring up the that slide we're just on, there's some more to it that I didn't get to answer. So what does it say? Does the father in resonance with moral law set boundaries for the children out of love and great awareness? Well, we need to understand what love means first. And if love means what people say tough love, well, that's a different definition to what I've been defining as love. Love is the acceptance of truth, right? So if you're setting boundaries based on the acceptance of truth, I've seen very few fathers do that. What I've seen them use is punishment and reward. And that's not moral because that's a form of coercion. So there's people who don't know how to distinguish the difference between these things. They have a very vague understanding of these terms, but they really don't know how they get manipulated without even knowing. And if you don't know that you've been manipulated, then you will yourself do those same actions, right? And then it says, and tell me, and if so, what point does the said child's awareness become equal to or greater than that of the father? I would actually go to say that the child's awareness is far more advanced than the father if the father's learnt the system of domination and control, because their consciousness has been contracted into believing the world is about who you can beat and who you can win. Where the child doesn't have that, so they would have their intuition would be way more advanced in the sense of acting on it than the fathers would. So I wouldn't even qualify the father as being someone who's, if they're grown up in a domination structure, as someone who has the capacity to set safe boundaries for the child.
And right at the end, at 48:30, you wrap it up with manufactured proof of concept, calling out to shame a man back into compliance with your narrative. And was his objecting to an objectively biased viewpoint not baited? This fails your quoted principles test. Do you live the ideas you present, or are you just reading a script? Last question, do you have the courage, integrity, devotion, cause to answer my questions sincerely here in public? I think we've answered that. Don't hate me for applying the knowledge you present freely to all. Nobody hates anybody, Bill. This is all about learning, and we enjoy the questioning. Now, off the leash, Fitz.
Yeah, like the same thing.
You
like,
you want to play that bit that he's referring to?
Oh,
at,
yeah, we
48?
can play. Yeah, we can play that, absolutely. The 1 hour 48 minutes.
So you bag God. Your scientism illusion is so crazy. So here we go, someone else in thought again. So just proving everything we've gone through today. There's some people who are going to be triggered by that and they cannot hold it. And then they have to jump in and espouse their opinion and create that illusion because it protects their beliefs, so they want to feel safe. This is perfect evidence of that. So thank you for that, Sparrow.
So that was someone actually put up a comment saying that I'm into scientism and stuff like that, So, and we spent all this time explaining how people's minds get controlled by what they've come to believe, but they've never actually challenged it and tested it against their own intuition because they've come to realize that it's safer not to, and they're not even aware of it. And so when you don't even look in that deep, you're actually believing that you're in charge of your own decisions and thoughts. And so, this is lessons that we've done lessons and lessons on this. And then someone comes into it and they just jump in from fresh and they just start espousing their opinion again, like it's some kind of truth. And so every time when we speak things, or well, I do, I guess, that rub up against someone's biases and prejudice, you'll always get something like this coming back. And when you question people to a point where they don't have an answer, then they start using venom and personal attacks. That's like classic. That's the last outpost of desperation, because they have to be a winner. In their minds, there's only two ways to be in the world. There's win or lose. If you don't win, you lose. And if you lose, you're not worth anything. So their whole self-concept is bound up by what they're worth based on other people's opinions. And so they think that if they throw their opinions at me, that I'm going to be crushed by that.
Yeah.
And if I was, I would never be showing this kind of stuff and talking about it, guys. That's the thing. Like your opinions don't matter to me because I don't need your approval. That's the thing. I'm not reliant on that. My confidence and my self-worth doesn't come from what you believe about me. It's really irrelevant. If I was bound by that, I'd never do this. See, that's why you can only stand in your power when that doesn't matter to you.
Yeah. 100%. Now, into our announcements. You've put up a slide here that says the project. You haven't sent me the video, so can you?
Did I? I'm pretty sure I sent you the link. It would have been video 4. Did you get? It would have said video 4 in all the links that I sent you.
No,
Otherwise, I'm going to need to find it. All right, let me see if I can.
Have... No, I don't have it at all.
All right, so I'm going to see if I can find it in my
send items
files. In my files, and then
hang on,
I'll
maybe
share
I'm looking
it.
at the wrong email box. Hang on, let me have a look at a different inbox.
So see who finds it first. Okay, just trying to find it here. All right, here it is. So this is So I just got to bring it up. I'm just actually I'm not going to be able to play it because I don't have I don't have my mic working today. So we're going to miss out on this one today. So we might have to leave it to next week.
All right.
So I'm using a headset today, so I can't play it through that. So we'll have to go to the other announcements and leave it for next week.
I knew you sounded so good. All right. Tax. The responsibility or theft. Is it moral to take earnings and deny your choice on where it is best spent?
So just before you go ahead,
Yep.
this is we've been putting together these I guess you'd call them public awareness campaigns, where we are actually speaking about things that really matter to the everyday individual. Because if you think about how the price of things has gone through the roof, it's a way to reach them and get them to start thinking about why things are so dire. So this is another opportunity for people to actually start using the power, but we've done the work for you. You just have to send it out. It's just something you could just send out on social media, and just you keep sending it, and eventually when people see it enough times, they'll start, as they're hurting more and more, they might start actually looking at it seriously. So these are some of the resources we've set up for you guys. If you want to make use of it, it's there for you.
Absolutely. Cost of living. Hang on. There's a few more points in there I should get to.
Yeah.
Are tax dollars being spent with the Australians in mind? Sorry, I'm tired. No, I wouldn't say that they are. Many people and services are at breaking point, 100%, but that's because there is a lot of pork barreling going on. And before the money gets to the people where it needs to be, it's been clipped 1 million times by all and sundry on the way past, all doing their bit to save the government money. The government doesn't make money. It only has what it takes from us. But you can't convince a public servant of that. Sorry, Fitz, did you want to say something to that point?
No, you go ahead. I think you're doing a wonderful job at it, actually.
Would you allocate tax dollars to returning manufacturing to Australia? I would make it compulsory. I would make it compulsory that a portion of every tax dollar received went back into creating a manufacturing industry here in Australia.
So this is the questions, right? A lot of people have these, but they don't say them out loud. So we're just trying to, pique that part inside them that actually, has that part that wants to say something about it. So we're helping that along, and we just got to join in and do it together. That's all.
Yep. Join in, do it together. If the government can take your money without your consent, there is no limit to the additional tyranny it can practice upon you. And not a truer word said. And they can and do on these days. There are many amongst the freedom movement. Dave Ennigs immediately springs to mind, who've had his bank accounts frozen for varying different reasons. I don't pretend to know the ins and outs of it, but they can certainly do it. Cost of living, the safety net or the breaking point. Is the cost of living spiraling out of control? Of course it is, by design. Do you work long hours or multiple jobs and still struggle to make ends meet? Yes, many, many, many people do. And it's not just one person in the family, it's both breadwinners in the family. Are you too exhausted and mentally drained to enjoy what little leisure time you have? Absolutely. And it puts strains on personal relationships, not just your husband or your wife or your brother and your sister that, you haven't seen the family in a little while. It puts strains on your kids and every other relationship that you have. Can you see a brighter future for you and your family? God, I hope so. And if you keep watching The Voice of Freedom, we're going to show you one. If you can't see that brighter future, then start watching The Voice of Freedom. We're going to show you one. Number 5, if the government can escalate the cost of living to prevent your right to prosper, there is no limit to the hardships that you can be forced to endure.
Yeah, so this is just, what we've come to understand, in our day-to-day lives, what we endure, and just seeing if other people have it as well. That's what we're doing. Is there a shared reality amongst all of us? Where is there common ground where there's no division? That's the whole point of these public service campaigns, because if we start talking about things that, that the normies don't actually have any idea about, we'll never unify. So we're trying to find common ground, and that's what we're working from. Stuart
raises a point here. Who's going to buy a $200 toaster? We're all globalists at the checkout. Yep, I hear what you're saying, Stuart. And if you go back, I'm not sure if it was last Friday night or one of the shows last week, at least, I discussed this very point. And that comes down to wages. That comes down to expectations of what people are going to be paid. I knew a bloke who was once paid $78,000 a year to work 4 days a week for Holden. watching a machine screw a nut onto a bolt. Must have been a very important bolt and nut. But he was paid $78,000 a year, 4 days a week. Union arranged to do that. And then he made another near enough to $2,000 every week on the 5th and 6th day where he'd go out working, where he's driving a forklift for $1,000 a day. So, yes, I hear that a $200 toaster is not something, we want to wind up manufacturing. I hear you. But I'm sure there are ways, means of making cheaper toasters, and with a little bit of rationalization, and provided the person who is making the toaster, who is putting the board together, who is, soldering the plug on, provided that person doesn't want $100,000 a year and has a realistic expectation for a wage, what was the old saying? A fair day's pay for a fair day's work. Well, I think that's exactly the way it should be. But is $78,000 a year fair to watch a nut be put on a bolt for 6.5 hours a day, 4 days a week?
Just wanted to digress for a second because I saw a really good one in the chat that I wanted to read. It's from Have Faith. She says, my ex-husband played the system well. His family were friends with the police commissioner. They made my 2 children and my lives misery. He passed away from alcoholism over 3 years ago. Now, this is like exactly why I did what I did, to show that we are all suffering from the same system. It doesn't matter whether you're male or female, right? It's irrelevant. And I'm loving the fact that people are bringing these stories forward. We need to get more of these coming forward, guys, because we're all being violated here. It doesn't matter with the amount, it's irrelevant. The system is there to violate us all and destroy the family. So if we don't unify, if that's not a big enough deal for us, right, then what else is there? Because without families, there's no life. Males and females have to come together to make people, right? So if we can't keep them cohesive, what have we got? So if we can just go to the social proof one, Carl, because this is, do you have the image that I sent with that?
Is that the same one we put up last week, the social proof?
Yeah, except this one's police. So I've redone it because I've seen someone was courageous enough to call the police, and I saw where there's ways to improve the questions. So I've redone it. It should have been sent to you in an image, like a PNG, in the last email I sent you. And so this is an opportunity for people to actually be even more, if they want to, because there are a couple of people who are getting courageous and calling up the police and the courts, and they're starting to show that these people have no idea about what a public servant is. They're totally clueless. And when they get asked questions, they're totally bamboozled. It's really worth a listen, guys. So we want more and more people doing this, because the more and more that this comes out, the consistency, then we can start showing the normies that these people that they believe are there to protect us are the absolute opposite. But we need to collect the evidence.
You seeing that now?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
right. You've got it.
Yep.
That's the one. So can you read them out, Carl?
Sure. Call up your local police station and record the conversation as evidence as you ask the following questions. Number 1, who am I speaking with and what's your position here? Number 2, is this police station publicly or privately owned? Number 3, being that this station is a public building, would that not make you a public servant? 4, in your training, were you ever provided with a universally recognized definition of what service to the public means? 5, can you explain how you define the principles of universal morality? 6, as you're armed with lethal weapons, do you believe it's important to have a clear understanding of universal morality and what it means to act in service of the people? 7, the oath of constable states without favour or affection, meaning you are bound to stand under the universal principles of morality. Do you agree or disagree? A public servant is required to swear an oath of office that they must be able to recite upon request to hold the authority granted them by the people. To the best of your knowledge, is that correct? Number 9, if you are unaware of the universally recognised definition of service to the people, nor capable of reciting your oath of office, how can the public you claim to serve get assurance that you act to protect and serve the people? 10, can you explain how, name of the police in your state, listed as a corporation registered for GST with an ABN, you can quote the ABN number, on the Australian Business Registry, and listed on Dun & Bradstreet, a credit reporting agency for corporations, is acting morally to serve the people? And 11, Can you explain how police recruited and trained in government-operated academies can protect and serve the people from a dangerous and corrupt state power, given the police are directly answerable to the government and not the people? Send your recording of the Social Proof channel to the Telegram channel.
So I've sent the links up to you in the private chat, Carl, if you wanted to put them out in the chat, to both channels. So if people wanted to get on board and start supporting this and start collecting evidence, what I will say is there is one on there where they were asked that last question, and the first time they didn't know how to answer, the second time they hung up. So it showed that they're not a public servant, because a public servant would never hang up if they were needing to ask questions. And so it's really worthwhile getting on the channel and listening to these things, guys, and then start participating and start collecting your own evidence. Because if we get them from all around the country, it's undeniable. Because I'm pretty confident you're going to get the same answers, right? They're going to be totally bamboozled and not know how to answer it. And you'll hear them say, I've never been asked that question before. So it shows you how far removed they are from anything that's got to do with service. But we need to collect the evidence, and we need to have them saying it.
Okay. I'm going to say that's it, because I'm going to go to sleep real soon.
Absolutely. So thanks for joining us, guys.
Pretty great show, mate. Lots of questions. Thank you, folks, for everybody who's joined us tonight. And thank you for your questions. Very enlightening, very enlightening. So really appreciate you taking time out of your Monday night to come and join us. And we'll be back for lesson number 28 next Monday night, Fitz. Yeah,
looking forward to it. So, thanks everyone for tuning in. The trolls included. It's always fun to have you on. We always like to see people project their inner world onto others. So it's just a bit of the tragic part is that there's no healing there for you guys if you just want to hurt other people. So have a think about that, guys.
100%. Mate, love your work. Talk to you next week.
Actually, looking forward to it. Good night, everyone.
And thank you, folks, for joining us tonight. I'll prove to you that I am very tired. Have a look at those eyes. Knackered. That's been a great show. I've really enjoyed a lot of questions being answered there. And, of course, we do read the comments. Fitz gets the opportunity less so, well, on me so less and less these days too. But there are others that are checking the comments, and those good ones that come through, we're going to keep bringing those up. We're not going to shy away from hard questions, and we will answer a troll once. But if the troll just wants to keep on trolling and be pedantic, then it's a waste of time. This isn't the channel for trolls. It's a channel for learning. And if you're brave enough to come here and learn, then put your prejudices to one side, you trolls, and see whether or not it's at all possible. Folks, really, really enjoyed your company tonight. And I'm really going to enjoy your company over the course of the next few days. We're going to have a few surprises for you. The show might look a little different at times. And you will be seeing the Galactic Larrikins. I will make sure that they get their heads on the camera anytime soon. It was a great drive down from Brisbane today. There were one or two dickheads on the road, thankfully.
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up. Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life. It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back. Does anybody else want to stay? Let's ride!